Welcome, revelers. This is Off the Rails, Right versus Left, the podcast that we do because we think the left is evil. I'm Rob B.
And I'm Brad Lee.
And I'm Brian G.
And we are Off the Rails, Right versus Left. Again, we're doing this show because we think everybody needs to know that the left is evil.
Classic.
Welcome, revelers. Ready for another week. We're finally back. Had some technical difficulties, but we're up and running again. And just in time to talk about some craziness. Got Biden like rambling about his nurse fantasies. You got racist ass elections going on. You got people getting assassinated on the streets of St. Louis. So it's kind of a crazy time in America right now. So anyway, I'm Rob B. With me as usual. And make sure before we really dig into it, you make sure if you haven't already, go ahead and like, subscribe, click that notification bell so you can catch us while we're live, because we like getting comments during the show. And let me make sure this way, so if we get any while we're doing the show, want to make sure that we're able to see them, and we'll dig into it. Okay, so the first one is like the Biden thing. Did you see this?
Uh-oh.
So, okay. I should have uploaded the video. I figured you would have seen it. But literally Biden is sitting there talking about, he had this nurse, and he said something about her being military, but he was never military, so I don't know why he would have a military nurse. Mm-hmm. And then he's talking about how she would do things that you didn't learn in nursing school. And then he's like fucking talking about her, she would whisper in his ear, and he couldn't understand what he's saying. Well, that's probably because his brain scrambled, you know. Mm-hmm. Oh, you know the thing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and then so that was that, and then my light sucks. Then he's like talking about her like blowing on him so he feels it, and like I'm like, okay, that sounds creepy. And then he was talking about like her bringing her pillow from home, and I'm like, okay, is this a nurse or a mistress? Like, what's going on here? So yeah, so I don't know what that was. I mean, it just sounded like another bullshit Joe Biden story. But this dude's like straight up like doing his Animaniacs fantasy on like live TV. Like, what the fuck, dude? You get the Animaniacs reference, right? Mm-hmm. Hello, nurse. So that was crazy. So, like, dude, when are they gonna like get this guy out of our misery? Like, what's the article that authorizes the removal of a president? Like, I think it's past time for him. Like, I get Kamala's brain's defective, but at least she has a brain. This dude doesn't have one anymore. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you look at the fucking speech he gave over in fucking Europe, and he's just like babbling like forever. It's sad, dude. Like, it's so sad. Sad for him and sad for all of us, because we're suffering the consequences of this dumbass.
Well, yeah. Everybody looks at us and fucking laughs.
Dude, you know what we should do? We should like just make a montage for the next show of just Biden bumbling. Just like the ultimate montage.
That would be our whole show. Just a montage of Biden.
Oh, we'll probably get a lot of hits.
Yeah.
We finally go viral. No. Anyway, So that was crazy. Okay, so the other thing that I was talking about, the like assassination. Okay, so there's this video that went out, and it like shows this guy. There's a homeless guy standing behind the guy, and he's like, and I'm gonna like make a funny point at the end of this. So this is in St. Louis, and the guy just like sits down on the curb, and like he pulls out a gun, and he loads the magazine, and then he feeds the magazine, and then all of a sudden the camera whips away. And the guy's like, oh my God, he just killed him. He just killed him. He just killed him. So there's a lot of shit that like, you know, this was fake. The video wasn't real. But then a couple hours later, there was live local TV reporting from that location saying that a man that was homeless was shot.
What?
So like literally this shit was live streamed on social media. And then the reporters were reporting from the scene later, and they still haven't caught a suspect. They like had it live streamed, the dude who fucking killed him. So, but it's crazy, like how fucking jacked up our fucking society is now. Like basically, we had the prelude to a execution, and like I don't hear anybody hollering for justice for this guy.
Oh, he's homeless. Nobody cares.
Yeah, so like, well, and then of course, homeless is less oppressed than another intersectional group. What's the ultimate intersectional group?
Transgender.
Oh, he wasn't transgender. Second most. Well, I don't know. Maybe he is transgender too. But we don't know that because they haven't bothered finding the suspect, despite the fact that he was basically assassinated live on camera.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that's just like the craziness. And then the fact that, like, dude, like, need armed citizens, man, because, like, that's just craziness. That, like, people just sat there and watched the guy get ready to execute him. They had plenty of time to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't do shit. Like, what did they think he was loading the fucking magazine for? I don't know. It was fucking crazy. But like crazy shit like that's happening all over the country. What's our murder rate this year? Like probably already over 1,000.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So anyway, I know you don't watch a lot of Timcast, but I know you were like saying about Chicago and Lori Lightfoot, ding dong, the witch is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, or she will be because they still have to have the runoff and then the general.
Well, she's not even in the runoff.
She's gone.
When the other person takes office, she's done.
So Chicago, which has essentially been doing CRT for a decade, apparently it's working. Because you overlay the demographic map right on top of the electoral map, and it matches up perfectly. The areas that are white dominated went for the white guy. The areas that are Hispanic dominated went for the Hispanic guy. And the areas that are black dominated went for Lori Lightfoot, with a big chunk of it being taken by like Willie Williams or something, who's like a nobody.
Too bad we're probably not going to get a conservative in there. They need to.
Well, I mean, it was the Democratic primary, so there's not going to be a conservative in it, but still. Like, it's just crazy how, like, perfectly, like, in opposition to Martin Luther King's dream, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they didn't bother judging the they didn't care about the character. All they cared about was, well, what race is the candidate?
Yeah.
So,
quality candidates matter.
No, equality candidates matter apparently nowadays.
No, because now look at what happened to Lightfoot. Dude, when she took office, murders went up. Like, there was 59,000 murders in the amount of time that she was mayor there in Chicago.
Dude, you know I wasn't like stumping for Lori Lightfoot there.
Oh no, I know. I'm just saying that it didn't really work out that way.
Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? Like, leftist policies don't work at all. The racial segregation policies don't work. Nothing that they do works.
The problem is, though, is the left is so good at convincing them that they need the left that they'll never. It's gonna take a lot to get them to, move towards the center.
Yeah, apparently not even the threat of death, because they're dying in record numbers.
Well, and people are fleeing too, so I mean, they're losing their tax dollars.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, like, uninformed voters. So it's
stop voting Democrat. Do not vote Democrat.
Who was it? Somebody.
Try, but Democrats will not ever do anything that will remotely help you or the nation.
Yeah, the only thing that they ever do is stuff that's going to give them more power.
They want to exploit fucking minority groups. That's why they keep coming up with minority groups, like the fucking lesbian and the gays, and then that it was bisexuals. Let us get married. Blah blah blah. We all know the whole slippery slope theory because we're not retards here.
Yeah. Well, and then
now what? They want to train your kids in the schools.
And it was like kind of like clearly, I mean, we'll see how the general election goes, but as far as the Democrats, like it was definitely split along racial lines. We'll see what happens in the general. Now, that being said, it's Chicago. There's not enough conservatives there to get a conservative mayor. But maybe there's enough people like tired of being afraid. Yeah,
maybe. Because that's what it's going to take. There's no other party that's going to like fucking give a shit about your safety. Certainly isn't the Democrats. They care about the safety of the criminal.
Yeah, and what I found interesting is the guy who the leading candidate, the one that got like 30-something% of the vote. He's the law and order candidate. Yeah, right, a law and order leftist.
Right, yeah, because he's like an extreme leftist too.
Yeah, like, so, I mean, the reality is we know that as soon as it's advantageous for him, he's going to abandon the law and order argument and just go back to rescuing the criminals and throwing the law-abiding citizens under the bus.
Right.
Because that's what liberals do. So, I don't see that changing, like, ever. Like, not anymore.
What's that? The people of Pennsylvania, bro. How messed up are they?
Well, apparently Gurney agrees. He had to get his nose in there to give his opinion. So, yeah, dude, like, I mean, so, and that's why I'm like, as I'm saying, like, uninformed voters, somebody, I forget who it was, some celebrity said they wished uninformed voters would stop voting.
Yeah.
But I forget who it was. But, like, they had a point. Because, like, if every Democrat, every person who's ever votes Democrat knew the actual statistics, there's no way the Democrats get another vote, ever. Like, every Democrat, like, ran city is a hellscape.
Right.
Every, like, Democrat ran state where the cities and the states are both ran by Democrats, you can have a 6-figure job and starve to death and live in a closet. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the reality of what it's like in California and Oregon and Washington and New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and at least New York State occasionally flips red for the governorship, but I don't even get, like, dude, I mean, it's ballot harvesting. It's ballot harvesting. We know that. We won't even talk about other, like, theories because ballot harvesting is like the clear and obvious. It's happening. There's no disputing it.
Right.
So, like, but it's still crazy. So, I mean, what's the solution? How do you get the country back? You know? I don't know. I'm asking. What do you think?
Term limits, man. Term limits.
Yeah, but okay, but so in a degree, that will limit the individual people, right? But if they keep voting for the same fucking D next to the name, it ain't going to change anything because they're just going to be like plug and play leftists.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like no software needed. Just plug in and get the same fucking leftist, racist diatribe, fascist freaking policies, and government theft for redistribution of the rewards of production. So, and then of course, more and more government control of the means of production. So it's like, no, I don't know. It's just crazy. So, and dude, even oh my God, like I still think that like 70% of the Republicans in Congress are fucking rhinos. Like, now that being said, so like looking at the shit with Ukraine, God, I forget his name. There was dude was kind of a leftist. I think it was like a liberal or a Democrat congressman or something was giving an interview on the show. And like his point was very accurate. Like, if Russia pulls out of Ukraine tomorrow, the war's over. You know what I mean? But at the same time, if we stop supplying Ukraine tomorrow, Ukraine will fight until they're burger. They will be mass genocided, and they will disappear from the annals of history. It'll end up being another embarrassment to the world, just like, well, I mean, letting the Soviet Union go on past World War II, and
just like the Spartans.
Yeah, and well, and not supporting government of China when the communists took over, and you know all that shit. But like just the way they all told the line, like you would expect if they have completely different political beliefs, they would have completely different reasons behind it. Okay. So, and you know, from my okay, so the reality is the only Russian speakers in Ukraine were forcibly moved there by the Soviet Union. You know what I mean? Okay. So if they're really that worried about being Russian, they should have gone back to Russia when the Soviet Union broke up. Right. You know what I mean? And like Crimea was mostly populated by Russians because all the Crimean Tartars were forcibly moved to Izhevsk over in Udmurtia, which is one of the federated republics way in the east. So they were like replaced by Russians, and then it was used as a resort by Russians for the next like 50 years. You know what I mean? And then like, oh my God, like I just actually like just saw some broadcast or some recordings of like Stalin speaking, talking about the gun control measures. And he's like, now no longer will our Russian brothers and sisters die without reason. And then he proceeded to murder like millions of his own citizens. So, like, I mean, and the funny thing is, like, the way he took control of the government was primarily by poor people having the same guns as the government. Or rather, that was Lenin that led that drive, but still. And then everybody that was a strong leader in the Bolsheviks, Lenin eventually purged out. You know, so it's crazy. But like Putin's obviously along that same line, and the crazy part is that he's got points, okay, but at the same time it's kind of like haha points. Like Ukraine has always considered itself European, right? Like even before they were like in the Soviet Union, they were part of European countries. They were part of the Polish Empire. They were part of the Ottoman Empire. You know what I mean? So like they always kind of considered themselves European. Most of the country, where there's ethnic mixing, it's Polish and Ukrainian. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but they are their own ethnicity as well. But that's still European. And so they did have big support. Like 70% of the country wanted to join Ukraine. And Putin meddled in the election to get Yanukovych elected. Right? Now, I'm not going to debate that Western governments help finance the efforts to protest and run Yanukovych out. Like they financed the protests that undid a stolen election. You know what I mean? In Ukraine, back in the 90s, YouTube, don't pull us because I said stolen election. I'm not talking about any U.S. election. I'm talking about the Ukrainian election when Viktor Yanukovych was elected. So anyways, when they held the new election, like his party still ran for president, right? And they got 13% of the vote. Yet he supposedly won 70% of the vote in the election that just happened. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So like once that wall went up and Russia couldn't interfere anymore, then it's suddenly a problem. And then like a few months later, boom, they're in Crimea. So now the interesting thing that kind of gets left out of this story is Russia's only real naval base that they have that's a warm water port is in Sevastopol, Crimea. So they were in the middle of trying to renegotiate the lease on that land because ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia had been leasing that land for their naval base for like 20 years. Right? And then Poroshenko said, okay, Ukraine needs to be about Ukrainians. Like, we love Russia, they're our brothers, but they are creeping on our culture, and we need to preserve, like, Ukrainian culture's almost been stamped out for the 2,000 years that the Ukrainian people have existed, and we need to have a strong Ukrainian national identity. And I don't think hosting a foreign naval or a foreign Navy base strengthens the Ukrainian national identity. And like a month after he gave that speech, and that was when they went to Ukrainian being the official language, which Russia has this big problem with it, yet the official language in Russia is Russian. Right. Like you're not getting any documents from the government and anything but Russian. And that's all that Ukraine did. The only language that you learn up until like junior high years in Russia is Russian. Then you can start taking an elective and decide, like if you go to a lyceum of languages, then you can start learning the different languages. Like if you're, and then you learn them like 3 at a time, like in family groups. So like German, English, I forget what the third sister one is on that. And then it'll be like Spanish, French, Italian. You know what I mean? They do them in groupings. So like the average linguistics expert in Russia speaks 4 languages at least. You know what I mean? So, but early on, everything's in Russian, which is all Ukraine did, is they said, hey, we're Ukraine. Everything's going to be Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. That's not to say, they didn't say you can't speak Ukrainian in your house. They just said everything in the government and everything in the schools is going to be Ukrainian.
Right.
So, and that's right. And that's what Putin was using as his like justification about like trying to wipe out Russians. No, they weren't. They're trying to preserve Ukrainian culture because half of all the media and half of everything, most of the movies, everything that they were getting was all Russian.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so they wanted their own, national identity. And so, it wasn't even necessarily bad. And it's the same thing that Russia does. It's the same thing that almost every country does. Every country supports its own culture before others. You know what I mean? And you go all the way to the other. Well, no, we do too. 90% of the movies are, we don't have an official language here, but you still learn English in all the schools. And if you come here speaking a foreign language, you'll be in separate classes, but it'll be ESL classes, and they'll be trying to teach you English. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're in a language immersion program, but then that's intentionally taking you into that program, not to teach you that language, not because you can't speak English. They teach them English in school. Mm-hmm. Now, we do put a huge emphasis, because we are a multicultural society, on providing translation services. But it used to be a citizenship requirement that you could read and speak English.
I think there still is that requirement.
Yeah, it is a requirement, but they have translation now.
Sneak over and we just give them fucking citizenship, that doesn't help.
Exactly. How are they going to take a citizenship test in English? And then you get stuff like all of our signs in this country are in English. So you can't you can't drive a big rig truck here unless you speak English. So truck drivers from Mexico can only drive trucks in this country if they speak English. So you had that huge fatal accident in Colorado that the guy got sentenced. And the reason he got sentenced is because he committed a felony that resulted in the deaths. And they said it was an unfair sentence, but literally people died in his commission of a felony, which was driving on an illegally obtained license, because he didn't speak the English to be able to take the test. He couldn't speak English at the scene, and even 3 years later when he was on trial, he couldn't speak English. So, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there are reasons for wanting your entire body to speak one language. Now, in Quebec, all the signs have French and English, but the English is still there. You know what I mean? You go to Mexico, in some of the resort towns, there's English and Spanish, but the Spanish is always there. So it's not an unusual thing that they were doing in Ukraine. Okay?
So when I was in Iraq, they had the signs in Arabic and in English, which I thought was weird. I was like, why would they do that? In Iraq, how many Americans were going over there and visiting? I don't know, but apparently
not visiting. Their entire oil industry was set up by Americans. That was actually part of the original. That was part of Al Qaeda's beef, was the damage that we did to Saudi Arabia's culture, because we had our bases there, we had all of our companies there, and all of that. So before they completely nationalized their oil industries, there were tons of American workers there. My buddy Shane, worked in Iraq as an independent truck driver for years. He wasn't a soldier there. This was in between the two wars.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? There were tons of American workers over there, because they were the experts in the industry. So, in Russia, there's actually a lot of places where there's English on the signs too, which kind of shocked me. But then that was in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and everywhere else you ain't getting anything but Russian.
Dude, when did when did the Arabic oil trade embargo stop?
That was under you're talking about under Carter.
The Saudi Arabian fucking embargo.
Yeah, that was at the formation of OPEC in the 70s. So, to get the exact date, you'd have to look it up. But I think that was one of the messes that Reagan cleaned up, if I recall correctly. So anyway, so back to Russia. So they didn't want to lose their port. They lost control of their puppet. And Ukraine had legitimate reasons for wanting to control their own destiny, like any other country. And So what he did was the little frogman thing, the little guys in green, and took over Crimea. But like literally, they had gutted their own military. Ukraine had, because they had written guarantees from Russia and the U.S. that their sovereignty would be protected. So they didn't really need an army. So they put no money into their army, like sold off most of the equipment as part of the agreement to disarm after they left being a member of the Soviet Union. You follow me? So it was real easy for them to go over and just take over because the Ukrainians didn't know how to fight back. So, and in the immediate aftermath, like they started building a defensive perimeter along Crimea, right? And then all of a sudden there was the quote unquote separatists over in the east. But the problem is like they could never, like in the referendums they had votes like higher than the populations and shit like that. But the referendums were a year after the Russians moved in with their military and their advisors and their consultants and their volunteers. Like, dude, they had almost 50,000 troops stationed there that were all volunteers supposedly.
The Russians?
Yeah, in the east. Okay, so the narrative, and this actually like really pisses me off about Redacted, because they do kind of like share both sides of the story, but they constantly talk about how like Ukrainians were just bombing the Russian civilians in eastern Ukraine. No, they weren't.
Yeah, they were bombing both of them.
They were bombing
their own. They were bombing their own people and the Russians.
Right, but the point is they were bombing the military positions that were set up by the Russians, and the majority of the soldiers that they were bombing were Russians and not Ukrainians. That's what was really going on in the east of the country. Like while that was all going on, I was over in Russia, and I met a lot of people who had family that were serving in Ukraine. Well, Russia is saying there's no Russians in Ukraine. Crimea is part of Russia, so that doesn't count. And in eastern Ukraine, no, those are all Ukrainians.
Right.
So now, even if that lie was true, so how did they fight a 2-year resistance against Ukraine? Right? Because Russia was giving them weapons, and now they try and take over the rest. So Russia says it's okay to give somebody weapons if they're being taken over, but then when Russia goes to try and take over Ukraine, well, nobody can give them weapons. Why should they be able to fight us?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you get the flip flopping in the logic.
Sounds like a Democrat.
So, yeah. So the reality of what happened with Crimea is they could not support, like that bridge is great and beautiful and all, but they cannot support the island and they can't provide it water. That's why, like the big talking point or the big sticking point, they said, oh, the U.S. told them not to make a deal. Dude, Zelensky said he was never going to give up 1 inch of Ukrainian land. And Russia wanted a guarantee that they keep Crimea and guaranteed water rights. He said no. And that's when Russia tried to push in and like connect all the way through Zaporizhzhia and Mariupol and all that, because it created the land bridge to Crimea and gave them access to the water to supply Crimea. That's the real reason why they're meddling in the East. Dude, even the referendum was fake in 2015, but they had a referendum, said they wanted to be part of Russia, and Putin said, we don't want them. Because he thought he'd be able to support Crimea from the bridge. As soon as he realized he couldn't, and they weren't getting tourists there, so there was no economy there, and the whole island was falling to shit, now they want to build a land bridge. So now Putin wants them to be part of Russia, and now they're Russia. You know what I mean? And even now, like, and yeah, Russia even said, like, China, they're not even going to look at China's plans, because China didn't detail whether they're considering the newly annexed territory as part of Russia or part of Ukraine. But they say in their plan that the territorial integrities need to be recognized. So they don't want to say that Ukraine has to give up Crimea, or they don't want to say that Ukraine has to give up their east. They don't want to say that Russia has to give up Crimea, because to them that draws a parallel to Taiwan. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but the difference is Russia actually signed off on that being part of Ukraine and paid them rent for the base there, acknowledging that they were the rightful owners of Crimea. Like, it doesn't, dude, if I sell you my car for $500 because it doesn't run, and you change one spark plug and it runs like a top, like, I don't get to take the car back because I made a mistake.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not that stupid, but, you know, you get the point. So, and that's kind of like part of the argument that he makes. The whole anti-Russian, blah, blah, that's all bullshit, because Ukrainians consider Russians brothers. But now they kind of like hate them because they literally talk about wiping out Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally their goal to make sure that no Ukrainian exists anymore. So, hold on just a sec.
Crazy. What was this symbolism you were talking about the other day?
They satanic.
I watched that episode of Michael Knowles.
Well, I mean, yes. Like, it's just kind of all over. So, like, it's on Grammys. I mean, you know, death metal bands and shit that had, like, satanic shit being, like, dragged out to the forefront and pushed. And so that's kind of what, all of a sudden, like, satanic normal. And like, you like remember, like, a murder they couldn't explain, they blame it on satanic papers and shit like that. And when the whole God thing's freaking out because, you know, it was devil worship and all this shit, it's like cool to be a Satanist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, I believe the left has been committing human for fucking 50 years. Like, millions of babies to Satan in the name of liberty for years. Man, I'm talking a lot this show. Don't you have any?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so. What surprises me is now. So like, I went on all of that, like, but at the same time, like, Crimea is obviously, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'll give you the parallel there. Get a license in Russia or Ukraine, like, whether or not you can afford to have a car, you include it in your budget, bribe the police officer so you don't get a license, get tickets. Or, you know, giving them positions and shit like that. That kind of created that because they were going down and expanding into Latin America. We're literally just straight up paying. And so the U.S. banning cash bribes. They give them lucrative positions on boards and as consultant bribe instead of just giving a cash bribe. Sense? So that's how Hunter, who knew nothing about energy, or Ukrainian energy company, because that's how Joe gets the bribe.
Right.
So it's dude, I was thinking after my gun arrives, shooting and test it out. We can broadcast it.
Heck yeah.
So, yeah, fix my windshield first. I don't want to get pulled over on the way up there because of my windshield. So anyway, like, I don't know. I'm kind of all in on better there than if Putin is crazy enough to start dropping nukes first. But you know you know, everything that Putin ends up saying waters first. And last week he started talking about the borders of Poland.
Yeah.
Dude, if they step one toe, like World War III is officially on. Or at least then it'll depend on what as far as what they're going to support. Now that being said, production is ramping up. Like our ability to produce high now is like 50% higher than it was before the war started. Ability to ramp production, and that was an actual World War II. Like over the course of a couple of like manufacturing capacity of the U.S. held up and flipped to defense. Like nobody in this country bought a new car for like 12, not 20 years, but for like 5 years because every bit of metal was going to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, so like, I just it's the battle we're fighting. We should keep supplying them. My battery's probably dying. So, yeah, I mean, without a doubt, we should keep fighting them if we're being a bigger problem, because they will keep going. Russia just throws bodies at the problem until they're out of bodies. So,
if they keep going,
like
if they try to go further than Ukraine, they're dumb. And then,
dude,
it's going to be the end of the Russian population.
Russian spring offensive head in the water. Like what? 200 meters of gains started. The attrition shit. They're destroying every building that could be possible.
There's not even any point in you talking.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Let's see if we stop breaking up.
Yeah, so it was a good test run for the new headphones, so like I'll just need to make sure that they're fully charged for the next show. But yeah, they worked great. Oh shoot, I almost forgot my external battery. Anyway, so that's the yeah, that's it. That's like I mean, if we fight it there or we fight it here, I mean, that's what it ultimately comes down to. And like
the only way Putin's gonna go further,
I get that Russia has a bunch of nukes, but 70% or like 80% of their population is in 3 cities. You know what I mean? And then you have to again remember that Russia is not one nation. It's actually a federated republic with federal control over independent nations, in theory. But I bet you all those other republics, because that was the thing with Chechnya. They wanted independence because they were a republic. They're not supposed to be a part of Russia. And they didn't want to be a part of the Federation. You know what I mean? So, and like Russia just said, oh, it's Muslim extremists, and went and like crushed them. And that was like Putin as prime minister or something. like before he became a president.
Oh, me?
So anyway, I don't know. I just it's weird to me that they're both sides are supporting it for different reasons. You know, it's just weird to me and suspicious to me when Democrats and Republicans 100% along the line agree on something.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I got to get back to my work. So
Yeah,
almost an hour in.
I'm gonna get to bed.
So thanks for joining, Brad, and thank you, revelers, for joining. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. And we're back in live, so we'll be going the rest of the week. So thanks so much for joining us, and y'all have a great night.